Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dan Cederbaum, and I have the privilege of being the executive director of the Mordechai M. Kaplan Center for Jewish Peoplehood. And it's truly my pleasure to welcome you to this afternoon's relaunch. For some of you, it will seem maybe more like the launch, but relaunch of a 21st century Kaplanian vision of Jewish education. I know most of you know this, but for the record, as it were, the Kaplan Center was organized at the end of 2010 and is based in Evanston, Illinois. We are a not-for-profit organization devoted to the transformation of Jewish community through the dissemination and promotion of the thought and writings of Mordechai Kaplan and the advancement of the agenda of the Kaplanian approach to Judaism in the 21st century. The Kaplan Center's perspective is explicitly trans-denominational. I have posted in the chat, which I hope people at this stage of Zoom familiarity all know how to use, a link to the educational materials that Jeffrey and others will be sharing. I'm just introducing the program. I need to turn lawyer for just a moment. We are video recording this program. If you are uncomfortable with that, you of course need not stay on, or you can turn off your video if that helps. You're asking a question or otherwise speaking will be deemed to constitute consent to our recording of what you say. And by the way, recordings of almost all of our programs are or will soon be available on the Kaplan Center website, and that includes this one. Speaking of programs, I know Jeffrey wants to get right into the program, but I have to say, please hold the dates for Monday, September 13, Sunday, September 13, Monday, September 14th, right between Slichot and Rosh Hashanah, for what I think will be a fabulous conference on Jewish religious naturalism. It's called Do Religious Naturalists Really Believe in God? We will have such eminent speakers as Arthur Green, Gordon Tucker, Rachel Shabbat Beit Halachmi, and a small host of others, and you won't want to miss this. There'll be a lot more information about that conference coming out soon. My main job here today, and it's a pleasure, is to thank Rabbi Jeffrey Schein and Rabbi Aaron Hirsch, Jeffrey being the senior educational consultant, as we have named him, of the Kaplan Center, Aaron being the educational consultant, slightly less senior, for all of their work, some of which you're going to see today over what's now a number of years. This project actually dates back to 2015, and a joint seminar developed then by Reconstructing Judaism and the Kaplan Center. Last but not least, I get to introduce our two first speakers, also a pleasure. So I could say so many things about Rabbi Dr. Stephen Carr Rubin. I think I want to say that for anybody who doesn't know, building on the work of the great Rabbi Abe Winokur, Rabbi Rubin built up by far the largest Reconstructionist synagogue in the history of the world, I want to say, in Kehilat Israel and Pacific Palisades, which I know he's every reason to be very proud of. He's done a lot of other things too, and he's now in youthful retirement from that position. He was ordained at Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion all the way back in 1976. He's done a lot of important work in education, which is why, of course, he's participating in the dialogue with Dr. Eric Kaplan today. I think I just want to note I think it's your most recent book, right? Year with Mordechai Kaplan, Wisdom on the Weekly Torah Portion. Thank you. Very important at the Kaplan Center, obviously, and you'll be hearing lots more of that. Rabbi Rubin currently serves as I said, as Rabbi Emeritus of Kehilat Israel Reconstructionist Congregation in Pacific Palisades. He's the past president of the Board of Rabbis of Southern California as well. Dr. Eric Kaplan is an associate professor of contemporary Judaism and Jewish education at McGill University, but even more important to me, he is a vice president of the Kaplan Center and my partner in so much of what we do. He is the author of a book many of you have read, From Ideology to Liturgy, Reconstructionist Worship in American Liberal Judaism, published by HUC Press back in 2002. And stay tuned, if you've lost your copy or want to give away more, we're about to help them republish it. Eric is currently assembling an anthology of Jewish social activist thought, which will be published by the Jewish Publication Society, as well as taking over from the eminent Dr. Mel Skult, who's on the call today, as the editor of the Diaries of Mordechai Kaplan. He's working on the fourth and final volume, which will cover the years 1951 to 1978. Stay tuned. Mel's third volume will be coming out from Wayne State University Press in just a couple of months, we hope, and you'll hear lots more about that. I hope that covers it, Jeffrey. With that, I'm going to turn it over, I think, to Steve and Eric, right?
Yes, but one reminder is that Steve and Eric will have a dialogue among themselves, and you are welcome to put questions in the chat room. And if you're able to stay on till 3:30, we have a very full webinar plan, but we do want to come back to some of your questions and comments if you can stay on till 3:30. So please put those comments and questions in the chat room. Thanks.
Lovely. And that 3:30 is Central Time.
Central Time.
All right, so we're on. So I had the pleasure, together with Jeffrey, of talking with Stephen just a couple of weeks ago and finding out more about his thinking on some of the things that we're going to probe together. But the first question is the most obvious one. It's just if you could say a few words about the book itself, what it does, and what brought you to write it. What brought you to write the book?
Well, it was the first of a series that JPS is publishing called A Year with Blank, A Year with Martin Buber, A Year with Abraham Heschel, and the first one was A Year with Mordecai Kaplan. and basically they had sent out several years ago to, must have been a random list of rabbis, their projection of the things they would like to do. And one of them was this whole series. And I saw that one of the things they were interested in was A Year with Mordecai Kaplan. And because Kaplan was so influential for me personally, in his thinking and in terms of my own rabbinate, and my opportunity to study with him in Jerusalem, my first year of rabbinic school, was really life-changing. I mean, experiencing him literally sitting at his feet in his apartment when he was 90 in Jerusalem was something that really sent me in the direction of Reconstructionism and the joy that I took in becoming the rabbi at KI, which, from its inception had been a Reconstructionist congregation. So I basically reached out to them and said, if you're interested, I would love to be the person who gets to write this book. And the most interesting thing really for me was they had no idea what this series was going to be about. They just liked the idea of having a year with. And initially they said, well, send us some samples. And I thought it was like, it'd be 365 meditations on, Kaplan quotes or something. So I picked some quotes and I wrote some meditations, and literally over a year, back and forth with JPS, it evolved into a Torah commentary. It evolved into a year with, really signifying that we were going to take the Jewish cycle of the Torah, and my challenge was going to be to pick something in each Torah portion each week, and then connect ideas and thoughts of Kaplan that I felt were relevant, not necessarily that Kaplan had already connected to those. So I'm not sure what Kaplan would think about this book, were Kaplan alive, and reading what I decided personally, Stephen Rubin, to choose as his thoughts and his ideas to connect to each of these parshiot, each of these Torah portions. But what evolved was that was the challenge. So it became sort of a three-tiered system, which then all the subsequent books in this series are following. So, which is a quote from the Torah portion and some short comments that I would make, and then a particular quote from Kaplan that I would then connect to that Torah portion, along with perhaps one or two other ones, and then a personal midrash, a personal drash from my own life or my own work or my own life as a congregational rabbi for the 40 years or so plus that I've been a congregational rabbi, that I thought would connect as well. And part of that challenge was to also include traditional material from Talmud and Midrash that would help elucidate the Torah portion as well. And so all of that became what A Year with Mordecai Kaplan became over the years that I was privileged to spend that couple of years immersing myself in Kaplan's thought. That was a
Great.
long answer to a short question.
No, that's great. That really kind of sets things out for us. And so you mentioned in your response that that part of what drew you to this was the fact that Kaplan has been so important to your rabbinate. It'd be interesting if you could say a bit more about that, kind of specifically, how Kaplan influenced your rabbinate and how some of the quotes that you're working with now, how them played into your rabbinate.
Well, what's interesting is, I grew up in Santa Monica, California, going to a Reform synagogue in Santa Monica, but my parents were always intellectually Reconstructionists. That is, they subscribed to the Reconstructionist magazine, which was, sort of on the dining room table or the living room table. My whole life, we've used the Reconstructionist Haggadah. We still use the original Reconstructionist Haggadah, as a matter of fact, because my mother is 97 and my father's 98, are very committed to that and have always been. So my whole life, I've grown up with that notion. They belonged to a kind of a chavurah within the Reform congregation that was sort of one of those intellectual exploring chavurot at the time, a unique kind of thing when I was a child, but wrestling with ideas of Kaplan. And when my junior year of college, I spent in Jerusalem at the Hebrew University, and one of the classes that I took was in sort of modern Jewish thought, and it was a lot of Mordecai Kaplan. And it was initially there that I started reading Judaism and Civilization and reading Kaplan and thought, boy, this guy is like brilliant. I was so excited about the idea of organic Jewish community, the idea that Kaplan had of literally the Judaism's the evolving religious civilization of the Jewish people. It was sort of, to me, I kept going, oh, this is like Judaism. This is like common sense Judaism. And I ultimately understood why people who are involved with the movement, with Reconstructionism, would constantly say, well, most Jews are Reconstructionists and they just don't know it. Because the more I would read about Kaplan's thought, the more it just seemed so self-evident in a sense. And then I enrolled in, not at the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College, but at the Hebrew Union College, in part because, the RRC started in '68. I started rabbinic school in '71. It was very new. I was a little anxious at the time. I was thoroughly involved in the Reform movement. I had known everybody there. I'd known the rabbis there. I'd known people, gone to camp. And so it was a comfort level in part. And because I always listened to my grandfather had two Grandpa Manny's maxims. One of them was, don't wish for fish, fish for fish. But the other one was always keep your options open. And it seemed to me that if I went to HUC, I might have more options. So in fact, I started at HUC, and my first year of rabbinic school was back in Jerusalem. And that was when I had the opportunity to literally meet Mordecai Kaplan, sit at his feet. And even at 90, he was scary, terrifying, this big, blustery, loud. We would sit in his combination of HUC students and JTS students who were living in Jerusalem and studying at the time in his apartment. And, he would be talking and suddenly he would turn and point to one of us and go, "What did Rabbi Akiba say about that?" And you would be in total panic because even if you knew it, just the idea of saying something wrong was scary at the time. But his thoughts were so clear and so inspiring. The notion of the empowerment, part of it was a sense of personal empowerment, seeing God not as an external being that acts upon you, but that power that works through you, that we discover in the everyday miracles of life. That inspired me. That I saw reflected all around, that sense of the human ability to have agency and to bring holiness into the world by the things we say and the things we do. And it became sort of my mantra as a rabbi, is that what you say matters and what you do matters and who you are matters. And I always felt that I sort of got that out of my readings of Kaplan and my experience of studying his words. So for me, it was always a source of inspiration.
Yeah, I'll call up, on the question of agency. I mean, some of the critiques that get, sent on Kaplan's theology is that it's kind of unsatisfying, when it comes to evil. Evil is kind of that part of the universe that hasn't been permeated yet by the God process in a certain sense. And as a rabbi, you touch on a daily basis a lot of joy and a lot of tragedy. I'm wondering how Kaplan spoke to you at both of those moments in your rabbinate.
Well, Kaplan said things like, what does it mean to be good? It means to make things and people better. Kaplan talked about to love God is to refuse to be depressed by the world. Kaplan had so much funny irony to me about Kaplan was that he's mostly known as non-supernatural, sort of a non-God person, and he spoke so much about God. He has so many things that he wrote about God. God is that aspect of reality that, one of my favorites, God is that aspect of reality which elicits from us the best that is in us and enables us to bear the worst that can befall us. I mean, what's more inspiring than that? And here we are living in this pandemic times when we should have that, sort of tattooed on our foreheads, that this is the source of spirituality and of inspiration that we can carry with us, that, the best that's in us and refuse to, and be able to bear the worst that can befall us. So, to me, that's always been my inspiration. And as a rabbi, people want reality. I mean, my experience as a rabbi is that they really don't want to be preached to. They want me to share in the everyday struggles of what it means to try to make life meaningful and worthwhile. That they're all doing. I mean, and I have always thought that, people just are doing the best they can. People that I don't agree with, people that I do agree with. And I've always sort of brought what I think is a Kaplanian vision of that we can make a difference in the world, and that, evil is not just the absence of holiness, but that evil is in part our giving up. People giving up on the best that's in humanity, their better angels, and allowing that other voice, the sort of Yetzer Hara, the sort of evil inclination that we all wrestle with, to take over in their lives. Somebody, after I did this book, by the way, there it is. After I did this book, people would ask me, look, you spent a couple of years wrestling with hundreds of Kaplan quotes. What's your favorite Kaplan quote? So I would usually tell them that my favorite Kaplan quote is the one where he says, the foremost problem of Jewish religion is how to get Jews to take the Bible seriously without taking it literally. Because it seemed to me that captures all of what it means to be a modern religious person. How do you take sacred texts seriously without having to take them literally? And that's what, to me, ultimately, one of my major roles as a rabbi is to be translator, is to translate traditional texts of the foundation of Jewish wisdom into something that a 21st century boy, girl, man, woman can relate to and connect with in the everyday struggles of their life. That is what it means to be a teacher, a rabbi, to me, in the modern world. And that's clearly Kaplanian to me.
Great, thank you. So I guess my last question to you before I turn things over to Jeffrey is, is when you're writing a book, it's such a long process. You have, I think, in your mind, all different kinds of target audiences. And I imagine that one of the target audiences were educators.
Yeah.
So playing off of what you just kind of said, and the fact that there are so many educators in this call, what do you feel is the the things that your book has most to give to somebody who's engaged in Jewish education like you've been for so many years?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, I mean, obviously, my dream was everybody in every congregation would get a copy of my book and use it to study Torah to study their Torah study every week. But for educators, I guess more it's kind of, I like the model. I mean, I don't have to use my book. No, I think I did a pretty good job. But it's more the model of how do we make Torah meaningful today? So to me, it was two levels. One was I could find so easily, hundreds of Kaplan ideas and quotations that I could relate to any Torah portion, and so I picked ones that I liked, but I would encourage every educator to do their own version of my book, essentially. That is, pick quotations that you think can help illuminate the traditional text. And then the third part of this book, of each of these Torah commentaries, to me, is sort of the most intimate. I mean, to me, it's a very intimate book because I was sharing my own life, and lots of personal stories about meeting my wife, about growing up, about struggles that I had, about feeling insecure as a child, about being a hyperactive kid, but all of those were chomer ladrush for me. They were all material that I could then use as a filter with which to illuminate this 1,000-year-old text that we call Torah. And to me, that would be the model for educators. That is, to teach yourself and to have your teachers teach themselves and use themselves in their own lives, as I've done in the year with Mordecai Kaplan, to help illuminate the text. And if I could teach anything, it's not my stories that matter. They're more illustrations and illuminations of how we can use our personal lives and make Torah that much more intimate and that much more powerful. Thanks for the question.
Amen. Well, thanks, Stephen. And like we said at the beginning, we'll take questions to direct to Stephen later on in the in today's session. So back to you.
Thanks for having me, by the way. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yishar kochacha, Stephen. That was really wonderful. And my job at this point is to help us go from chomer ladrush, generating materials that are sermonic and broadly about general Jewish life, to what I call chomer lechinuch, substance that makes for good Jewish education. And my goal here is not only to talk a little about that, but to share the resources of the newly developed 21st century educational Kaplanian vision with you so that you might be more comfortable and you'll actually have a chance a little later to move around. And the first thing I'm going to do is suggest that you have good chinuch ladrush, good educational materials, if you have three things, and we'll hear about those in the form.
The 21st century Kaplanian vision for Jewish education. Why a vision? Put simply, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. Or in the more metaphoric language of a Jewish text, education requires a guiding vision. A Hasidic Rebbe, who near death has a dream of his disciples tinkering with the spokes of a wheel. The Rebbe is aghast. He awakes himself so he can remind his disciples that it's really the hub of the wheel, not the individual spokes, that holds everything together. The vision is the hub of our educational wheel. Why Kaplanian? In a tradition teeming with wise Jewish leaders and teachers, Rabbi Mordecai Kaplan stands apart because he offers a comprehensive vision that integrates a profound understanding of Judaism, a working theory of education, and an actionable program for Jewish education. These aspects are woven together into a powerful vision. Why 21st century? The world we experience is dramatically different than the one Kaplan inhabited. The Kaplan Center for Jewish Peoplehood convened educators, rabbis, and scholars to explore in what ways Kaplan's ideas about Jewish education are relevant today. Together, we formulated a 21st century Kaplanian vision of Jewish education to draw attention to the vision, the Kaplanian, and the 21st century dimensions. The evolutionary process never ends. Now it's time for you to join in and help us grow the vision. Whether you're Kaplanian thinkers, scholars, and rabbis, educational decision makers, education directors and rabbis involved in communal education, or frontline educators, you have something to offer. Just remember, the very act of evolving a vision is itself a joy.
I am going to now take you back and share with you. Just 1 second, please. Okay, here we go. You know, my new book is called Text Me, Ancient Jewish Wisdom Meets Contemporary Technology, which you would assume that means that I'm not going to be subject to technological glitches, but that's not quite true. So here we go.
Jeffrey, do you want me to put it on my screen?
If you could, Erin, take us, let me try one more time, but if you could, and Dan, if you could enable Erin.
Okay, you got my screen now.
Okay.
You want to see the website?
So, Erin, let's go to the website.
Okay, doing that now.
Okay.
Can you see the
Well,
Kaplan
I
site?
can, but the question is, can other folks
Other people
see it as well?
Yes, the top part of the site.
Okay. And
top
why
part.
don't you go to the vision page? Or I can do that. I am now sharing it. Okay. So here we've come to the 21st century Kaplanian vision. And I want to share with you a little Misa, a little story about when I shared this just a few months ago with students from Hebrew College, master's students in their education program. And one of them shook their head and said, you know, this is pretty good stuff. I really like it. But if there's one thing I associate with Kaplan and Reconstructionism and his philosophy is that it's always evolving, it's always changing, it's always meeting new challenges. And that person was right. So I think I'm going to start by taking you to a couple of the places where, having formulated this vision, you'll see more of it shortly, but having formulated the vision, already we're asking important questions about what it means to have an educational vision. So I am going to first ask Erin to, well, I can do this myself, to take us to, Erin, if you would, take us to Sid Weitzman's comments, the Yesh Omrim. Having formulated the vision, a couple people have some questions that they think are really very critical. Thank you. And after saying the appropriate nice things about the vision, Sid wonders out loud whether any kind of vision, no matter how profound, means anything if it's not in conversation with the everyday life being shared by Jews and human beings today. So she says, I wonder if Kaplan's vision will take us to the same place that I know the struggles of my parents, my Jewish parents, and the people in my school will take me to. And it's a great question. And to me, it forms a dialogue. When I honor her question, I then go to something posted by Ariane Weissman from B'nai Keshet, where she talks about the contemporary challenge of authenticity and relevance. Thank you. And here I think there is a stunning insight, absolutely stunning. You can move down just a little bit on the page, Erin, thank you. She says, when I look at the Jewish families that I serve, I see the following paradox. I see them as being extraordinarily disciplined and demanding of their children discipline when it comes to arts or recreation or sports, because that's what you need to excel at those things, and they're all there. But I see a kind of mirror image, the exact opposite of that, in relationship to their Jewish aspirations. They're not passionate and they're not demanding of the same sets of skills and discipline that one would need to move forward in one's Jewish life. And I find that very provocative and makes me want to think and continue to evolve the vision we've laid out here. So that's sort of the, I would call it the intellectual thought side of the materials that we have here, of which there is much. Don't you agree, Erin?
I do, but I also want this to be, to really stay with the useful part, where I, as someone walking into classrooms to work with kids, can understand how to adapt Kaplan for, for people who, don't connect to all these words. This website is just full of words and intellectual ideas, and there are not a lot of places for me to go to translate what Kaplan does.
Well, Erin, let me, if you're willing for me to be your milaveh, your guide, why don't you, if you don't mind, click on Frontline Educators, that icon on the front of the Vision page, if you can go back there to the very beginning of the Vision project, and go down a little bit. This mountain takes you to things, but you can also get there by going to Frontline Educators. So here there are a host of resources. Erin, you may not have been aware of them, but might be more appealing, more connected to your avatar life as Erin, the teacher of fifth graders and others in all sorts of Jewish educational settings. Tell me a little more what you're looking for, and perhaps we can find it here.
Well, I read a lot of Rabbi Sandy Sasso's children's books in my classes. But after I read the books, I sort of, which suggest non-traditional ways of thinking about God. But after I read the books, I never know exactly what to do with it. And I certainly don't know what to do to help families share Sandy Sasso's ideas with their
Erin,
kids.
might I recommend to you that you click on In God's Name Matching Game, right here, and tell me what you see here and how you think it might be utilized.
Oh, so this is a game that could work with younger kids, where after we read Sandy Sasso's book, where she talks about people with different places in life, understanding God in different ways depending on the situation. And this is a game that allows kids to match ways of referring to God, imagining and understanding God with life events of early elementary students.
Well, that sounds productive, but why don't we go back to the menu for a moment for frontline educators, because I'm guessing that not only do you want to give them that kind of connection, but you care about the questions they ask, and I wonder if you click on the Burning Bush play written by someone coincidentally named Aaron Hirsch, whether you could say a little bit about what they might discover here in terms of constantly asking questions about the divine.
So this is a play that's great to use in religious schools as to trigger a conversation, and it basically runs through, in the course of the script, all different ways of understanding God, so that it prompts a creative discussion with kids, and it can launch many different activities. So you can see in this first one, God, it talks about God as sort of a God spark in people. And then it goes on and I'm talking about, you can see here, for a source of divinity who doesn't like magic, he sure did a lot of magical things in the Torah, things that couldn't happen in nature. If you don't like magic, why did you do so much of it? And then it has God explaining God's own evolution.
Well, Aaron, I think this is really wonderful, and I congratulate the Aaron Hirsch that developed it. And I should let people know that the next big project in the education arena of the Mordecai Kaplan Center for Jewish Peoplehood is a book entitled Lifelong Learning for Spirituality and God Connection, of which this and some of the other materials here are prominent parts. Well, Aaron, I hope you're feeling a little better, that with the proper navigation, you can get both to big questions and talkless materials.
I do. I want to show everyone just where we are. So once you get to the visioning project on the website, there's this cartoon that actually every section is hot linked. 2 sections on the menu that's on the right, they all take you to the same place. So a visual way to get somewhere, not just relying on all the words. And then at the top of the page is a user's guide. And we want to make it as easy for people to delve into the website as possible. So we organized these 4 categories: the thinkers, scholars, and rabbis, educational decision makers, education directors and rabbis in communal education, and frontline educators. So they each have an icon that you can follow all the way through. In the 4th section for each group, these are resources, example materials that we think are suitable for each, category of person. So, oops, sorry, I skimmed. Yeah. So I was looking at frontline educators, but there are a lot of education directors on here, and these are some classic materials, and we would love to increase it.
Right. So we want to honor your particular role in Jewish education. We have a rather Aristotelian notion of visioning rather than Platonic, namely that the vision is related to role and craft, and that's why we direct you to these places. Aaron, if you would, and we know that unlike Aaron, who has this double life as a contributor and a searcher for materials, that some of you will benefit from spending a little time with Aaron or myself, perhaps Eric, depending on what you're looking for, and finding materials that you can utilize in your classroom, or even pass that on to put us in touch with the teacher who you'd like to see us work with. Aaron, would you be kind enough to go back to Aaron Weissman's piece that we took a look at? And I'm going to ask you to do something when you get there,
Can I
please.
find it just a second?
Okay.
There you go.
Could you, Aaron, and the shame Jeffrey, but we sometimes speak in the same voice, go down to the comment section, which is at the end of each thing, because we want to encourage dialogue and comments. And could you go into it and make a comment from Jeffrey saying that this is such a provocation. Paradoxes are always a provocation. And this dual character of being so disciplined in one segment of one's life and undisciplined in another, just say that it has Jeffrey thinking, because it does. And we hope there'll be many materials on the website that does that for you. And now what we'd like to do actually is give you about 10 minutes to do your own exploring of the website. If you can open another screen and still stay with us. I'm going to be talking to give you signals when to come back. But you'll see in the first comment in the chat room is the link that will take you to the material, to the website, to the visioning project, right over here to the at the very top. And I invite you to take 10 minutes and see what's of interest to you in the resources that are there. And then I'm going to bring you, I'll give you a signal, ask you if you could make a comment. If you have trouble making it in the chat room, in the comment section, which I don't think you will, but you never know, you can please put it in the chat room and we'll preserve those comments. So go explore for 10 minutes and I'll signal you when we'd like to see you putting comments in the chat, in the commentary box where the resource is, or in the chat room. Okay, and then put it again up there. If you go to the kaplancenter.org and go to the educational, under education, to the educational visiting project, you'll be right there. Okay, have fun. I'll be back in touch with you in 10 minutes. So please explore and eventually comment. Okay, Aaron, if you can stop your screen share, then people will continue to explore on their own. And thank you for stepping in this way. Appreciate it. It looks to me like people are looking around. I'm very pleased about that. So let's take a couple more minutes. Okay, so hello, Jack Wolofsky. Glad you joined us. I would like to encourage you now, wherever you are, to take a moment and go down to the commentary box, whatever article or reflection captured your attention, and leave us a comment about why it connected or what other questions it raised for you. And if for whatever reason you have trouble leaving it in the commentary box, sometimes if you're both in the same, looking at the same resource, you might not both be able to enter. Use as the backup the Zoom group chat and just put it here and we will preserve it, because we are getting back to folks who give us the benefit of their commentary with an offer to continue the process in terms of exploring resources on the website. So take a few minutes and drop into the commentary box a thought that you might have, a question, or put it in the chat box. I'll give you one more minute and we'll gather some of those thoughts. Okay, so if you're working on a PC, this won't work on a Chromebook, I've discovered, but if you have a PC or an Apple, probably at the bottom of the screen, you will see a little icon for reactions. So I'd like people who have that available, if you don't, you can just raise your hand, to click as I've clicked. And if you need more time because they just couldn't get through the resources that were there, then do a thumbs up and I'll know you need the gift of more time. So just, there you go. Thank you, Lainey. Other people who need more time are letting us know. Very good. Okay, for those of you who couldn't get to the icon, if it wasn't enough time, just raise your hand. We'll know that that you're part of that process of continuous learning as well. Okay, so now I would like to turn to a couple people who indicated, well, this is actually a different question. If there was some material that captured you, that engaged you, and you'd like to share that with us, would you please unmute yourself and tell the rest of the group what you saw that you found interesting, and other people will be listening, and that will expand the tour that we're taking of the website, because I'm sure not everyone went to the same place. So if you found something that you have more questions about, that you thought was particularly interesting, just unmute and tell us what it is that you saw, what you found. I'm reading a couple things that got put here. Practical applications very helpful, and there are many options here. I am looking for insights in the teaching Torah with an awareness of intersectionality, which is so central to modern feminist approaches to reading Torah. Can I find the relevant source here that will address issues of intersectionality and feminism? I think so, Kimberly, but it's probably another discussion that we need to have. Jane wanted to know, how can the expression pray to God be interpreted for children to avoid disappointment when prayers are not answered? Really good stuff, the right kinds of questions. And I hope we will find more of them as we go to the website. I'm very much looking forward to exploring and see what you've left behind. And in the interim, I figured out what the problem was with what I wanted to share. So we're going to do this again. And I am going to bring this document up. And this requires a brief introduction. I have asked people who have made very significant contributions to crafting this 21st century Kaplanian vision, to either in a direct role or supportive role, to read through this kind of predicate theology of what educational exploration of God means. And I want to name those people and then ask them to walk us through this document, which will bridge us into something Mel is going to share, who has also made contributions. So I want to call out, as it were, the following people who will lead us through the document. And that would be Rabbi Jeffrey Eisenstadt, George Kelly, Dr. Eric Kaplan, Rabbi Aaron Hirsch, Tara Saltzman, Carol Morris, Sue Penn, Dan Cederbaum, Jackie Land. We love you and appreciate your contributions. And I will get us started, and then if you just come in with your line, we will hopefully hear the cadence and the crescendo of what it means to have an exploratory Kaplanian approach to teaching God. So, a la the notion of predicate theology, that you have it when you ask the question when, not why or how, but when. You know you have a creative, exploratory, Kaplanian approach to teaching God when
the teacher is growing as much as the learner.
When traditional formulations of God are given serious consideration.
When new contemporary outside-of-the-box approaches are given equal consideration.
When hashmaya aznecha lamamotzi mipicha, when you pay careful attention to the words about God that come out of your mouth.
When you have developed a very active antenna for searching for God in our everyday experiences.
When God is as a process and verb are given equal weight to God as a noun and subject.
When your school has established a God Seekers Club.
When the rich tapestry of Shemot, names of God, in the Kol HaNeshama prayer book are all explored for their connection to the student's life.
When you use Kol HaNoar, the Reconstructionist Children's Siddur, for God exploration as well as davening.
Thank you for the reading and for your contributions, all of you. And now I want to up the stakes a little bit. I want to say that these markers of an exploratory approach are all a foundation, but there's one more critical thing we need. Our approach to God has to be rooted in Tzarchei HaSha'ah, the needs of the hour. And here Dr. Mel Sculpt shared with a number of people through the Kaplan Center website and through an email, this really valuable, important insight about why Kaplan seems so relevant given the times we are living in. So Mel, I would ask you to please, I'm going to move down so people can see it a little better, but please.
Well, I can begin with I have a group.
No, we're not hearing you. And that, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, much better.
Yeah.
Thank you.
To begin to use the new technology, I established a group on Facebook called the Mordecai M. Kaplan Group. And I post things there a couple of times a week from Kaplan. And this paragraph that I'm going to read to you was originally posted on the Mordecai M. Kaplan Group on Facebook, and I invite you to be members of that group. We have about 200 members at the present moment. I suppose I'm most proud of the fact that one of our most active members comes from Australia. That gives me a big kick. Anyway, here is what Jeff has asked me to read. Kaplan has been accused of a naive optimism that belongs to a previous era. But the truth is that we desperately need his faith in our ability to overcome the difficulties that life presents to us. We will not survive, much less achieve salvation, shlemut, if we succumb to despair, self-pity, and doubt. We must rise above such feelings. And it is when we transcend ourselves in this sense that we grasp the true meaning of the divine in our lives. Kaplan puts it this way: every time we rise above the corroding doubt, we grow in the awareness that what obtains in the depth of our personality is but an infinitesimal fraction of the creative and redemptive forces in the universe that spell God.
No, thank you very much. And that actually provides a segue for some crowdsourcing we're going to do. A guiding document that goes with this new book, Lifelong Spirituality and God Connection, is a public record of what it means to act in a godly way in these particular times, which means the time of COVID-19, institutional racism, polarized politics. And I invite you to, I will be the faithful Sofer, the scribe here, and I will begin to build this document with your contribution. So when you would like me to put something down here, a description of people acting with godliness in the forefront of their characters, I will do this. So the introductory phrase is, you know you have approached Derech Elohut, the path of godliness in life, during these extraordinary times of coronavirus, protests against institutional racism, divisive political rhetoric. You know you're on Derech Elohut when, and I am now your scribe. Someone give me a when to enter the document.
Well, may I speak?
Yeah, but no, you may. I think I'm going to give you the last word here, but I do want to collect some fragments. So just give me a scene, a vignette of a child, an adult, a senior, acting in a way that tells you that in these difficult times, that Derech Elohut, the pathway of godliness, is still here.
Jeffrey, there's some in this chat.
Okay, well, translate for me. I'd like to get them to this document, so thank you.
You want me to?
You wear masks in public.
Please. If you could read them back to me, I will enter them here. Thanks. When
you wear a mask in public.
Okay. And another?
You wear masks and can find a way to convince non-mask wearers to wear one without alienating them or creating a conflict.
Tall order, but hey, godliness isn't easy. Another, please.
That's it.
When you elevate truth.
George, I think that was you, but say it again. I wasn't quite hearing.
When you elevate truth over misinformation, lies.
When misinformation, lies. Is there more? George, I'm sorry, I wanted to complete that thought.
Yeah, this computer I'm having to use just
I'll read
isn't
it.
good with
George,
it.
I can read it.
Yes,
He wrote, when you elevate truth over misinformation and lies.
Thank you.
And Daniel Resnick wrote, you are at peace with yourself and with what you see as the best in others.
Mm.
And yeah, I'm trying to separate the other comments and questions from, did you get when you vote?
No, I didn't. When you vote, okay.
And when you elevate humans and humanity.
Okay.
I would say when you're willing to listen to someone with a different political opinion than yours, with an open mind.
Yeah, just fix your, Jeffrey, before you're done.
And peace.
With a different mind.
Okay, I think maybe one or two more, and I'll thank you for having.
Yeah, but Jeffrey, you have to humor me and fix your in there. So you are willing. So the last line.
How about your willingness? No. Okay, very good. You are willing.
And we have a
and I
couple
always
more.
have this little bit of jousting. Okay,
We
you
have a
are
couple
willing.
more.
Very good.
When you peacefully protest against systemic violence, racism, and sexism. Protest against systemic violence, racism, and sexism. This is coming from George, not from me. Peace is P-E-A-C-E when you get back to it. When you see silver linings every day. That was from someone named Deborah Shine.
Yes, I know. You don't have to say that for my sake.
When you use your privilege to help others, from Judith Mizrahi. You use your privilege to help others. And when people come together to work, when people come together to work on projects that transcend differences, which is importantly related to some of the earlier comments.
Okay. Okay. So this is of a piece with some of the earlier comments about a 21st century Kaplanian vision has to keep evolving to, as Maimonides would have it, address Hora'at Hasha'ah, the needs of the hour. And thank you for helping us get started there. Mel, I said that you would be more than welcome to offer a concluding comment around this work in progress. So please.
Kaplan is noted as a process philosopher. And we rarely think of the processes that we have in mind. And I think these suggestions, some of which are very mundane, altogether make up the process that is leading to our salvation. And,
Okay.
and that Kaplan sees as elements of divinity within us. I think the problem is that we tend to deprecate our own efforts, and we don't take ourselves seriously enough theologically. And for Kaplan, the process within the self of overcoming in all the ways that people have just pointed out are elements of the divine. But what I feel very strongly is that even though predicate theology is a very, very important aspect of Kaplan's thought, he rises above that. And for him, the elements in the self, the elements of moving towards self-actualization and self-realization are connected with the rest of the universe and with the rest of the community. He has the very, very interesting notion of cosmic support. And he does believe that there is a support for those elements within us, which people have just pointed out, which are moving towards our salvation.
Thank you, Mel. That's very important, and I appreciate that bigger picture that you're always able to give us. I just want to note a couple other entries that I closed the list, but I will take these and put them into it soon after this is concluded from my Rabbi Sharon Stiefel. When people come together to work on projects and transcend differences, I may have captured that, but I don't think I caught Sue Penn's when you ignore the isms and treat everyone as if they were created B'Tselem Elohim. It's a lot of profound wisdom out there that you're sharing, and I appreciate it so much. And I appreciate it that in so many different ways you've become part of the celebration and the unfolding of this 21st century Kaplanian vision. You will get a follow-up note from me if you want to pass this on to someone else in your educational community, would like to tour and find some resources that come September would be very helpful for that third grade teacher who's teaching kids about X, or the high school teacher who's teaching them about that from our Kaplanian repertoire. We'll be glad to point you that way. And I also, in a moment of exceptional generosity, promise those of you who would like a connection to my cousins in California at the Shalom House, who have an arrangement to send a gift card to you as a Shana Tova gift. So look for an email from me, and then you can respond to that. I have a couple comments about some upcoming things, and I think Dan has some thank yous, and turning back to any questions and dialogue people might have about Eric and Stephen's initial exchange. So I do want to let you know that education is sort of coming into this summer niche for the Kaplan Center, and on August 23rd, there's another webinar, and this one is called, this is my reflections about what's changed over the last 4 months, or the last 10 months since I published the book that some of you know, Text Me, Ancient Jewish Wisdom Meets Contemporary Technology. I'm thinking differently about that now, and I invite you to join with me and to explore the kind of issues. I even have a teaser for you. Don't try to answer this now. Let it marinate, think about it. But here's the question. What is the connection between Zoom, the platform we're using, and Jewish funeral practices. More than one answer, but that will be a bit of a surprise when we're together on August 23rd. And I invite you to think about that. I hope you will be able to join us. And when you get, as you have, the information, that particular dialogue will be of interest, I think, to non-educators, anyone who's a 21st century human being who's living through these times. So I'll encourage you to be our emissaries, to send it out to others who maybe don't usually join the Kaplan Center webinars, but this one would be of particular interest to them. So I do.
Well, Jeffrey, before on that point, I don't want to lose it. So the link has already been sent around to some of you. It's unlike today's advanced registration required meeting. That one is essentially an open Zoom meeting. We will continue to send the links around. And no pressure, but if anybody in this meeting is not on the general Kaplan Center mailing list, please either chat me right now or email me or call me. The information's on the website, and I will put you there.
Okay, thank you, Dan. That's a good public service announcement. And I do want to thank Dan for all he does to anchor these webinars, to make them possible, even when we get confused between Central and Eastern Time, and even when we sprout 15 versions of Jeff and Deb Shine. Because it's really outstanding, the dialogue he encourages. And I want to thank my colleagues Eric and Steve Carr-Rubin, Eric Kaplan, Steve Carr-Rubin, for their dialogue, and the many, many people who you heard their voices, who have been part of the generation and development of this 21st century Kaplanian vision of Jewish education. Very appreciative that you could join the call. And I think I want to go back to Eric and Steve, and perhaps Dan saw this as well, to allow you to circle back. I have not been able to follow any comments that might have been placed, and maybe some people have comments about Steve's presentation that are only forming now. So we actually ended 10 minutes early, Baruch Hashem, and I'm going to give it back to my colleagues. I
haven't seen anything in the chat that is specifically related to the earlier parts. So if anybody wants to unmute and
yeah, I've just unmuted. I think that's right, Eric. I think we should just open up the meeting to oral questions now, or comments.
I found Stephen's comment that Kaplan inveighed against depression and as clouding one's ability to I mean, I've always thought that mental illness and or just psychic depression is a clouding of the godliness within, and that either with help or whatever, the either therapeutic help or just talking yourself through it, that one can access the godliness and become more with the world.
Lovely.
So interesting from an early childhood perspective, because it makes me think of that developing self at the beginning of life that is so crucial to our being throughout life. You know, children are so young for such a short time, we forget about that importance then. I'm a broken record, I know.
Mordechai Kaplan uses the word supranatural. Supranatural. In other words, when we move up the ladder of self-actualization and we actually embody the values of justice and mercy and so on and so forth, we are doing something supranatural. I like that better than transnatural. I think supranatural has an obvious intuitive meaning. It is naturalism pushed to the ultimate.
And on that note, I forgot to mention that Mel will be one of the speakers at our Religious Naturalism Conference. So come hear more of that from him there.
I wonder if we can back it up just a little bit in these closing moments. You can comment about Stephen and Eric's dialogue, but I think this is also an opportunity for people to share, if you'd like, what inspires you about the philosophy of Mordecai Kaplan, and why you might turn to him with or without Steve's help. It's a wonderful book, by the way. I just want to make a plug for it, that at Mayim Rabim we used it among board members, that we passed it around. Each month a different board member would give the Devar Torah utilizing the book, it's a very user-friendly book.
Oh, come on, you got to make everybody buy it. Pass it around.
Hey, come on, we're a small congregation. Give us a break. Or I should have offered to have the Kaplan Center buy copies.
Yeah, we have several.
For everybody in the movement.
Yeah. Which movement is that?
Any movement, every movement.
Anyone
Can we
else?
buy them to the Kaplan Center? Dan, can we buy them through the Kaplan Center?
No.
All right. Okay.
But Stephen will tell you if there are any, I don't know what JPS's deals are.
I don't know, they have deals but all the time.
From time to time, they do sales.
Yeah.
Okay. So I hope you found what I would like to do, Dan. We have a few extra minutes, and I think we always in Jewish life shortchange process with a small p, Mel. And I wonder if people have any comments that they'd like to make and share about the website. We took you there for a reason, and what you found, or about this webinar as a whole, what you found interesting, illuminating, confusing, arguable. We just invite some feedback, which we rarely have time for, or I rarely have time for in my workshop. So please, if you have something you'd like to share with us, just unmute and let her rip, as the Dixie Chicks would say.
They're no longer the Dixie Chicks.
I know, that's why I call them the Chicks.
Sorry.
I'd love to have a program at some point, a Zoom call with some teenagers who've been through our schools, talking about some of these issues, what, their God concept, their idea of being in the world, confusions, approach to Bible and Bible stories. I've always wondered how you get over the hump of the literalness of the Bible stories to a more sophisticated view. We lose them often at an age where they just begin to be able to process things in a much more sophisticated way by 6th grade. And if they don't continue, I'm just wondering I'd like to hear from the kids what we leave them with.
That's a really wonderful idea. Thank you, Jane. In the Lifelong Spirituality and God Connection, there is a master poem. My masterful wife does more than early childhood. Deborah wrote it, called Love Starts the Learning. And it actually traces the shifts that occur as people move through the life cycle and what we need to be doing with the education. And then I picked that up from there. What do we need to be doing about the educational materials we generate and the experiences we provide that is cognizant of those changes? But I love the idea of not talking about them, but talking with them. And so, Jane, I might follow that up with a conversation to get it clearer and maybe make it action.
Okay.
Okay. Anyone else have a comment about our couple hours together, or hour and a half together?
I just want to say that for Mordecai Kaplan, education was at the center of his vision. I think even perhaps more important than civilization was the matter of education. In 1937 to 39, when he went to the Hebrew University, he was professor of education. So that was enormous, and involved in education his whole life, in educating rabbis. And so we are, in a sense, or Jeff is, in a sense, is carrying on this work, which is so essential to his vision.
Yeah, I'll return just for a minute to that short video and say that I often find educators who have sophisticated educational theories. I often find people who are producing educational experiences, and I find people who have thoughtful Judaism, but rarely do I find them in one package, which is why I find Kaplan so constantly stimulating and challenging in terms of the work of Jewish education. Any
I'd like to
other?
ask a question that was prompted by material I read on the website before coming, and that is attention is given to very compelling criticism of the term peoplehood by Toba Spitzer, and I'm wondering if there is a defense of the continued use of the word peoplehood that's equally compelling.
Well, Shel, that's fine of you to pay that kind of attention. And Toba is one of our more creative thinkers. I think Kaplanian, or should we call ourselves post-Kaplanian? I think if you go look at the 21st century Kaplanian vision and the details of it, we the collective sense of the people developing the vision end up calling peoplehood the prose door, the chamber through which you need to move in order to maximize the meaning you gather from Jewish tradition. And I love arguing with Toba about it. I understand the problems that come with the term peoplehood, but I am rather Buberian here in the sense that Buber said, just because we have so much trouble talking about God, that doesn't mean we throw the word out. Instead, we try to purify our use of the word. And I would say, for me, the same is true of peoplehood. It has, it can be easily misrepresented.
So we're not going to see a change in the name of the Kaplan Center.
No, you took away my line. So let an old-fashioned tribalist say something. We're not changing the name. I suggest you take a look. It's not so recent now, but you may have been there, Shel. I apologize if I've forgotten. We did a whole conference with the RRC and Temple on Jewish peoplehood. And I think the videos are really wonderful. They hold up. They're all on our website. You can watch all of the debates on every aspect of this question. But some of us are sticking to a bit to the old-fashioned view, for sure.
But Shel, I thank you for reading so carefully. That's been one of the benefits of this, is to get people engaged with the material that's there. Any other closing comments? I don't know if that was Joshua who wanted to share, but we're getting near the end. I probably have time for one or two more comments about what the website portends for you and what this time has been like.
Well, the third volume of Communings of the Spirit has an enormous amount of material which can be used by educators. It runs from 1942 to 51 and will be out in early October.
Okay,
thank you.
Thanks. And any word from the educators who joined our call, whether you found and discovered something I'll see in your comments, but something interesting, stimulating that you'll be thinking more about.
So Jeffrey, this is Jeffrey. Mm-hmm. And I just want to say that you've been working on this now this is going into its 50th year, Jeff, that you're working on.
Oh my God.
And I'm happy that I've been part of those 50 years, but it's so exciting to see the website, because all the work of Kaplan now is coming just onto a click, and we're able to access all the work that you've been doing now for 50 years. It's terribly exciting, and keep going for another 50, okay?
Okay, Jeffrey, if you'll go with
yeah, as both Jeffreys know, Kaplan worked constructively and productively into his 90s, so we certainly expect that here too, not to jinx anybody.
What a good Mishabera.
Kinohara.
Okay.
So should I just close with a global thank you? Let me thank everybody who's on. Let me thank again in particular the wonderful Rabbi Jeffrey Stein and the wonderful Rabbi Aaron Hirsch for all of their work now, as I said, going back several years. Thanks in particular for today to Rabbi Dr. Stephen Carr Rubin and Dr. Eric Kaplan for their wonderful beginning for our program and stimulation of conversation. And to be continued, as you heard, on August 23rd, then September, at least a couple of programs coming up in October, so stay tuned for all of that. And be well, that most importantly, be safe and be well.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Okay. Thank you.